Your Akashic Records contain the wisdom gained by your soul through all of its existence. It is available to support you on your journey now. Are you curious about healing modalities, but don't know how or where to start? Which ones are real and what's just a trend? Who to trust to work with you or in your energy? Me too. I'm Cris Greer, and this is Grounding Journey. I've been on a lifelong journey and wanted to dig into a variety of ways to heal along the way and the tools we can use to do it. So I found some neat women who use different modalities to heal themselves and those around them. I invited them to have a conversation with me where they can share about their journey, what called them to their favorite modality, and how they use their tools on their journey and the profound results they've seen. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Grounding Journey. I have my new friend Vanessa here, and I tell you, she's my new friend because we've already done the Akashic Record reading that we're going to use as the bonus episode, and it was amazing. So Vanessa is a bilingual Latinx bruja, founder of the School of Healing Artes online, whose mission is to elevate BIPOC and Latinx healers and leaders. She's a third-generation psychic medium, a teacher of teachers, healer of healers. She holds global classes in 2 languages in Reiki, Akashic Records, clinical hypnosis, and intuition training, and is also known as the Biz Bruja and writes bi-weekly astrology columns for Bellatina. She's also recently hosted and co-hosted the Energy Medicine Summit for the Shift Network and has her own podcast, the Biz Bruja podcast. So Vanessa, I'm so excited to have you here. And that was a lot to say, but you are such a multifaceted, fascinating woman. I'm excited to talk to you about your journey along the way.
Thank you so much. I just love it that we're here. And yeah, it was a mouthful. It's so interesting because I think when we start out, we're like, our bio it can be so simple. And as we move through and we go through time and we get older and add more is added, and you're like, how do I keep it? So it's still a mouthful, but yes, thanks.
Yeah, well, Vanessa, I'm so glad to have you. And we did do the formal, but tell me who you are. Who do your friends know you as?
My friends know me as, I think they would say that I make them laugh. I'm that person that they could call at any time and I'll be there for them. And I think they've said this many, many times where I'm like somebody that will find some silver lining to the most effed up rainbow situation. Like, you're like, this is not the rainbow I expected, but I'll be like, well, look, there's a little. And so they're like, you keep us grounded, you make us laugh. Sometimes I do crazy voices. I don't think I'm going to do any here, or make fun of situations and then just make them laugh. And I think that I'm also not afraid to be vulnerable now. I think when I was younger, I definitely was. I was in that whole archetype of I could do it all myself and I don't need anything. And my friends have witnessed me being very vulnerable. And I think it was good for them too, because it's like, yeah, you can cry and you can feel and you can still be strong AF. You know what I mean? It's like you could still be all these things. It's not like vulnerable and emotional and that or strong. It's like we are all in both. And so I think that's what they would say. They would say that I make them laugh, that I'm lively, I have energy, that I'm there for them, and that I've been through some shit.
You have, because we've definitely kind of touched base on that when we did our pre-call. And I love that you are real about all that. And this is our 3rd conversation that we've had. So we've interacted several times. And so that's why I say that you're my new friend, because I feel like I've got that connection with you already. And you have such a light and a shine about you. And I know some of your backstory. I obviously don't know the depths of it, but I just know bullet points of your backstory. And that's what's really neat to me, is that you have had some intense stuff and you still have this beautiful light that shines through. And that's really neat.
Thank you so much. And I really feel that that's part of our human journey. Just because we haven't gone through something doesn't mean we're not going to. I'm not wishing it on anyone, but
right.
These beautiful, right, multidimensional spirits and souls that chose to come down to earth and have this human experience. Well, what's more human than loss, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
losing our parents or losing our friends or losing people as we go through this journey, either through death, right? Or through just we're not in the same place anymore. And so we break off with people and friends. And so the journeys of loss, the journeys of being ourselves, even if society's not with us or has caught
Mm-hmm.
up to us or is accepting of us, these are all like human experience of having children or getting married or not getting married or illness. I think that spirit does engage in being a human being to gain this information and this experience. And so I don't think any of us are escaping it. You know, again, I don't wish it on anyone, but we're here, so we're going to have these experiences.
For sure. And so share with me, because I want to hear a little bit about your journey, because as you said it with your bio, you've added a lot of tools to your toolbox. You've really come into a lot of those resources. Tell me where you were when you started, before you put the first tool in your toolbox. Where were you in your emotions, your life, your world? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Well, I am Latina, so I grew up in a South American home. And while Catholic based, very, very spiritual. So I grew up with an altar. You know, I grew up lighting candles. I grew up prayer, meditation. I grew up trusting my dreams, just that knowing that we had to learn how to understand them because everybody's dreams are different. I said,
I
so
love
for
that.
me, I started reading people at 16 years old. So, but it wasn't like a tool, it was a gift, right? And so one of the things that I noticed as a kid is that I saw my mom, my family members going to get readings. I was little, I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I saw people give readings that made people cry, that had people shift something inside of them. But then I saw people doing the same thing,
Mm.
right? Like still repeating the pattern. And I was like, wow. So it's not enough. I mean, for me, in my mind, my 11, 12, 13-year-old mind, it's not enough to just be psychic or gifted or spiritual or intuitive. It's what we do with it, like at a young age.
Mm.
Like, what do we do with it? And so I started reading what was available, 40 years ago, 38 years ago, which was Louise Hay. Celestine Prophecy came a little later. And so I was a person who was already talented, gifted with intuition, with a supportive family. But I was very interested in how do we heal? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to sit there and either get deep downloads, which we didn't call them then, that, we used to call them like transmission or a message from the universe or whatever we called it. I didn't want to just get messages and then keep living my life in a dysfunctional way. So
Uh-huh.
from a young age, as a teenager, I was already like, well, how do we take this beautiful gift that I know everybody has? How do we work on it? And so that's where I was. And then my first, and in my family, we were doing limpias, which are cleansings with the egg. And so you pray on it, you run it all over your body, and then you crack it, and then you drop the egg white with the yolk, the whole thing, into a glass of water. You wait a minute, and then you read the cup, and you look at it and see,
Huh.
did I release some heavy energy? So I had those tools, and I had prayer as a tool, and I had intuition as a tool. Um, but I was like, well, how do we heal? And so then one of the first things was learning Reiki, because from my family, I learned how to pull out things from the body. So literally
Mm-hmm.
being guided by spirit, but then I'd be exhausted. So what was
Mm.
happening, it happens to a lot of new empaths or healers who are just awakening to being who they are, is that then you're like, oh, I'm weighed down, I'm so tired. And that's where I realized, wow, how do I heal? Because I'm intuitive, but how do I take it the next step? And how do I not be tired? And back then, the word empath wasn't like 3 decades ago. No, we didn't have that word.
Right.
So it was, my mom would say, you're a psychic sponge. And she'd be like, you're just
Mm.
like la abuela. So I want to share a very quick story. So I was 16 years old. I was in Florida on vacation, and I had just spent time outside having the best time with friends. And I walked in, and my mom was having a deep conversation with her friend. Her friend had her back to me as I walked into the room. And I walked in all happy. I'm like, yeah, life is good, and I'm like walking in. And suddenly I got hit with this energy in my chest and in my body. And I felt suddenly really sad. And
Mm.
then I started to say out loud, why did he do this to me? This is horrible. And then I said, what's wrong with me? Why am I saying this? I was just happy. Now I'm miserable. I don't know what's happening to me. But it was like hit me in the chest, hit me in my body. And next thing I knew, I felt this wave of like pain and sadness and loss. And I said those words and I said, oh my God, I'm going crazy. And I ran out and went to the bathroom to cry. My mother came after me. She's like, my friend has just spent an hour and a half crying in the dining living room area that her husband ran away with her friend. So when
Oh.
you shouted or said out loud, why did he do this to me, and run out crying, that's what she was doing for 30 minutes. So, and my
Mm-hmm.
mom's understanding, she's like, you're a psychic sponge. You're like my mother couldn't go to a funeral. She couldn't be. So my mom taught me a simple technique of how to cleanse myself with water, with my
Mm-hmm.
forehead and the back of my nape, and kind of like say, I release this. It's not mine. And then I came back out, dried my tears, and my mom's friend was like, wow. And she hugged me, and I was okay. And so all of this gift and this empath ability, and it's like, well, but how do I not make these mistakes? And what
Mm-hmm.
I mean by mistakes is, and maybe they're not mistakes, right? Because they're actually not. I wanted to choose somebody that would be a healthy relationship, right? My parents did not have, they had a unsettling relationship, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be in relationships like I saw my friends getting married too early. And again, that's part of their journey. But for my
Right.
young mind, right? My young mind was like, I don't want to make a mistake. Now I know as an older person, nothing is a mistake. Everything teaches us something. But I was like, how do I do human life right? Which, there is no
Mm-hmm.
right. And that's where I had to learn. So that's where I was before, like gifted, intuitive, had some tools from family, but was really concerned about living a better life, being freer. In my family, I read a lot of books as a young kid, and my dad would literally say, why are you reading so many books? You're just going to grow up and have babies and be home.
Ugh.
Because, my dad passed last year, and he was, close to 80. And,
Okay.
Latino machismo. You know what I mean? And my mom was a journalist, so she actually had some sort of career before she got married, but still, he'd be like, why are you just reading? You're just going to be at home, and I'm not going to do anything with your life, like, as if you don't. People who are home
Mm-hmm.
raising kids, it's a very honorable and beautiful position, and you could still read your books and do what you do. But the mindset, and then my
Right.
mom was different. She was like, get out there, learn. I read, I went to school, I did things. So it was like this crazy, how do I do this so I'm not carrying forward this pain of machismo and oppression as a woman?
Mm-hmm. That's a big, and I think that that's something our generation is really being called to do right now, is to heal that for our mothers and our grandmothers so that our daughters don't have to, that they get the opportunity to heal whatever we need healed. It's kind of that,
Yes.
that lineage of it. And I know that I have definitely had a very strong calling to heal my ancestors' stuff in the last few years, more so than before. And that's
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
powerful. Mhm.
Absolutely. And it's astrologically set up that we were supposed to all start to come to this.
Mhm.
Um, and in my family, because we had an ancestor altar where we had pictures of my ancestors, we used to light the candles, and also saints. And the stories of our ancestors were told a lot. Like, I already knew, even coming into my 20s, that so many of my mother's side of the family were artistic, and kind of when they got married had to like write it off. Like, my
Mm,
grandmother
mhm.
could have gone to a big theater and was scouted by talent to be in the most famous theater of Argentina, Buenos Aires. But you didn't do that in the 30s.
Mhm.
The 30s, you were a woman of the night. You know what I'm saying? And a woman of
Mm,
the night was even cast upon, and sex worker deserve respect as well. But I'm just saying, in that moment, this is how you were cast, like as something that was negative and not wanted. And so I knew that. And so my life too, I knew that I had to heal through creativity. So I sought out being a director, performing in plays, doing belly dance just as a hobby. And now recently I do improv. And there are nights where I get on the stage and I'm like, Abuelita, my mom's mom, Abuelita Cecilia, I got you, girl. I do it for fun. No one's telling me I can't be on stage. You know what I mean? Um,
mhm.
and also, I don't really ask for permission
Mm,
or even discuss with my husband.
mhm.
I'm like, oh, hun, by the way, I'm joining a class. He's like, okay.
Mhm.
So trust, there's a lot of like healing that's been going on in that way.
Mhm. Well, let's talk a little bit too, because obviously it was very prevalent in your young life. And I think that so many of us do come, as I've discussed my son, for example, how intuitive he was. And then it kind of had to close down to get him through his teen years because of where he was. I think all of us have that gift. Some of us shut it down, some of it's shut down for us you obviously chose to keep it alive, and your mother was able to kind of fan the flame for you. Let's talk about when you knew the moments, the journey, however long it took for you to say, okay, I'm going to be a healer. I'm going to be a healer of healers for a living instead of just kicking it on the sidelines.
Oh, I love that question. It's so, and my grandmothers too supported it. So it's just like the whole family in their own way. Um, so at 21, I had an automatic writing. My guides were talking to me already, and I was like channeling, writing things down. And I was at NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, film school, and I wanted to be a film director. And my guides wrote, "It's very cute that you're taking these classes and you're here." I know they were just not the friendly. They were not like the most. They were very like kind of like far away from the human experience. These guides that I had at the
Okay.
time, and they're still here, but I've learned to like deal with them in that way. And they were just like, "It's very cute that you're doing that, and you're supposed to do it. It'll come in handy later," which I think it comes in handy now on Instagram and other things to be able to like look at
Mm,
something, right? And have like a visual perspective of that I learned, and lighting, right? And things like that. But it's like, well, you're not going to be a film director. You're going to be a spiritual director. So,
mm-hmm.
that's like how long ago? That's like 28 years ago. And you're sitting there and you want to be this film kid or person, adult woman. And you're like being told you're being a spiritual director. I'm like, am I going to be a priest? Am I going to be a pastor? What am I going to do? What am I going to be? What's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And since then, so much has happened, including Wi-Fi, the thing around the world. The minute where I was already doing it in my 20s, right? I was already doing healing sessions. I was already doing, I believe that so for me, my serving community is at the heart of being a bruja or a curandera. Now we're watching a different phenomenon where people are taking one workshop. They're like, oh my God, I had a download. I'm going to be the next Ayanna Van Zandt or Oprah or Tony Robbins or whoever. And I'm supposed to heal the world, right? Tons and tons and tons and tons of people are getting that. Right. And then they're like putting up a shingle the next day. And that's what's happening right now. Or you can make money online too, type of energy. Back then, this is family line. This is ancestral.
Mm-hmm.
You just give your community. That's what you do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that changed for me was I was doing it part-time already. And in 2012, so I was doing it part-time, making 45,000 a year, probably, right, with part-time, and a full-time media coordinator, media manager position. And I stepped into my 9-year numerology, which is the end of a cycle, right? It's like the death, the end, the conclusion. And it was also 2012, which at the end of that year is the end of the Mayan
Oh,
calendar.
yes.
Right. So in October, the day before major surgery, I was laid off the day before major surgery, had major surgery, blood loss, had a breakup with somebody that was a soulmate. So this is all 2012 happening. And I already knew because I'd been told already, you're supposed to do this for a living. You're supposed to do it. And I'm like, I have $2,000 rent in New York. Get away from me. I don't know if I could do this. It's too much. So I was like, I'm a good person. I do all the free, healing circles. And then I'm charging very little. Like I'm doing the things every month for like 17 years. Like I was very much like spirit. I'm doing my work. I'm giving back. But they had other plans. My spirit had other plans. And so October, surgery, layoff, breakup, travel into Miami for a family vacation, car accident. And so the car
Oh.
accident was where everything changed. I was laying in the back seat and I heard sit up straight so you don't break your back. Check to see that your parents have a seatbelt on. My mom didn't. She put it on. Take off this big clunky bracelet from your right arm so you don't hurt yourself. Took it off. And within minutes, I'm like, okay, leave me alone. I'm tired. And my dad was speeding. I could say it now. He's, on the other side. Don't
Right.
throw a boot at me from the from the sky. It's like, wow. And the tire burst. We started to collide into a truck, and I'm literally sitting there holding myself and going, wow, this is it. This is it. The Vanessa life ends this way, my God, in a car accident. So I'm
Mm.
sitting there like asking the universe and spirit, please pull me out before I hear the neck crunch. Pull me out before the pain. Like I'm literally like asking. They're like, you're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everybody will be fine. Everything's fine. My father finally was able to pull us away from the careening truck because I was like, wow, we're going to smash into it. And we start rolling. And as I'm rolling, I'm like, pull me out, pull me as I'm rolling in slow motion. I keep hearing everything's okay. You're going to be fine. Everything's fine. We land. My parents are hanging from the inside of the car with their seatbelts from the ceiling. And I'm sitting because I did not have a seatbelt on. And I'm like, am I gone? Am I dead? Am I alive? And then I heard people screaming, my siblings, my brothers. And I yelled back when I felt my throat. Like I was like, ah, and then I'm like alive.
Mhm.
But when I did that, I helped my parents get out from their seatbelt. My mom was screaming. She'd had a heart attack and a minor heart attack and had 5 ribs broken from the seatbelt. My dad had
Wow.
this glass on his forehead. Now, pots and pans flew past me because we were going to stay 2 weeks in a house we rented in Georgia for the holidays.
Okay.
We had all taken all our stuff. Glass was breaking. I had nothing. Like I even held
Wow.
myself in position until I guess I dropped. No back issue, no neck issue. I mean, when I told the people who showed up that I didn't have a seatbelt on, they put me in a neck brace, took me to the hospital. They were terrified. I was in shock. We went to the hospital. But when I crawled out, when I literally was crawling out of the broken car, I heard, do not go back to corporate. So I'd been laid off in October, right?
Mm.
Now it's December 21st, the end of the Mayan calendar. I'm like, do not go back to corporate. You have everything you need. Just go full out. And it was just like, what? I'm still in shock. I don't know what's happening. Um, and that's where I got the message like, yeah, what you do is all great. And you've been doing it for a long time, almost 2 decades. This is what you're really meant to do. Like you're meant to like do it, be a healer of healers,
Mhm.
teacher of teachers, like go full out. And after my mom healed and we were able to travel, I came back to New York and found out I had MRSA on my body from the surgery in October.
Oh, wow.
That was horrifying. And so it was
Mhm.
really intense. And then I pressed the wrong thing when I was on the medication for my unemployment because I got unemployment from, October. I
Right.
canceled my unemployment. So all of these things lined up where my love life got changed. I was I could have moved in with my parents, I guess, in Florida, but I left my home and built my business while I was staying in Panama, Costa Rica, working, like teaching, speaking at retreats and online and still healing my body all at the same time.
Mhm.
And the first month, I taught a class on the phone because we didn't have Zoom, we had Skype. And so I
Right.
had to teach intuition on a conference call with a PDF, $3,000 first month, the first class. They said, let's do the next one, another 3,000, paid my rent. I was like, okay. Left my home, had to like literally as an adult woman, leave my apartment and let somebody else rent it. So these were like extreme things that I didn't do in my 20s. Do you know what I mean? And it
Mhm.
was really challenging. It was like, oh girl, you want to hold the space for people, then you're going to go out there. And so
Mm.
I think that these extremes don't have to happen to everyone. But for me, now people ask me questions and they're like, after what I've been through, I
Mhm.
can manifest anything. I got the support. So that's what happened. And that was 2013. And that's when I went full time and I never came back. And since then, like growing, but that was the turning point. So it was a lifetime of already, I was doing monthly circles in my house for 17 years. I
Mhm.
didn't charge the first 7. I used to teach at women gathering festivals and I would teach to 100 people or do live readings and I would give my services. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It wasn't like now where everybody's like, I got to get paid, I got to deserve, and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that a lot of us who went through apprenticeships to spirit or to different priestesses or
Mm.
teachers, back in the day, you didn't make money like immediately. You actually worked with people and were in the trenches for a little bit longer. And so
I
that was
love
when I
that.
realized it's a long story, but that's really what happened. And I've never looked back.
Mhm. I love that you said apprenticeship to spirit because I think that's so important. And, talking about the fact that we do all have that intuition, we
Yes.
do all have the ability. And, as you and I have talked, as my listeners have heard, my full time gig is running online programs. And the women that I run online programs for are amazing. And it's kind of supporting you in developing your intuition. But I also, because I watch the landscape, so to say, you see so many people popping up because they've done a workshop, they've done a weekend. And I love that you say apprenticeship to spirit, because that's one of the things that's so soul stirring, soul developing is the apprenticeship to spirit. Um, I've just
Yes,
never thought of it that way.
and it's unique to everyone. And no, who's to say that someone's not supposed to put up a shop really fast and go through
Mhm.
whatever experience? Like I've met a lot of young women who, in the last year or two during the pandemic, created a class after taking a class. So they didn't let anything really sit, and then had psychic attacks, came out of it. Now they're like regrouping, right? Or I've
Right.
seen other people who are like, wow, it was really draining. And one of the things I said is, well, because you haven't built up the capacity yet.
Yes.
Right? Every art, like I was talking to a friend of mine who does henna design, and she just went for a week to do henna design at a big conference. And I said to her, you've been doing this stuff for 14, 15 years. You're like, bam, bam, bam. And then you get up, stretch your arms, and you're fine. Right. And I said, I
Mhm.
can do so many readings and teach so much. And I mean, in all, we're all different. And it's not a race, it's not a competition. Not everybody's meant to do all that. Some people are meant to speak, write more. There's just differences. But we need to build up capacity. So what we're teaching and sharing isn't all stuff that we read or heard on a podcast. Because I've literally seen people get into my monthly membership, receive downloads that I'm given in the down, and then they go online on their IG and just repeat what was shared in the class as if it was theirs. I have seen this. And so a lot of people are confusing the resonating of sacred wisdom as to that they can go share it as if it's their own. Obviously, there's some truths that we're all going to uncover. There's some truths
Mhm.
that we're all going to experience because we're all connected and we are all connected to the Akashic Record. But I find it interesting back in my day, what we would do when we felt like I would read books and be like, oh, I resonated, almost felt guilty. Like, how can I be this 19, 20-year-old and be like, I know this. I know this. I'm reading these spiritual books. And I'm like, I know it. Yeah, of course, it's resonating deeply with my spirit. But it takes a minute for the sacred wisdom that's within us to be integrated into the ego and into the person that we are. So it's not ego expression, it's an embodiment of this wisdom that we're already carrying into the present incarnation. Does that make sense?
That is so powerful and such a good message to share with people. I think because my flip side of it is I've been doing Reiki and channeling guides for almost 20 years, but never been comfortable stepping out with it because I don't think I've learned enough. I think I'm still reading. I think I'm still exploring. And so looking at that as the apprenticeship to spirit and listening to you say build up the ability, because I know for me when I first started doing we would do a monthly circle, and once I started kind of seeing and hearing guides so much, our circle got bigger because it kind of got passed around and I was very insecure, uncertain, uncomfortable sharing, but they were there in front of me so I had to, kind of a thing.
I went
But
through
I
that
know
too.
yeah, and I know for me, what happened at that time is that Kevin was maybe 3 or 4 at that point, and he started getting the nights that I was at Circle, he was getting the psychic attacks. And so I didn't know how to protect myself. And because he was so young and so connected to me, it was coming through at him. And that's when Kevin's room became a crystal grid and has stayed that way at 20. So like sharing these things. And I think that for our listeners of Grounding Journey, that's the kind of stuff they need to hear of there is a way to develop it, and there is a way to develop your tolerance, and there's a way to learn to protect yourself. And so I think that everything you're saying about your journey is so powerful. Let's talk for a moment, because I know that you said your mom taught you how to cleanse yourself with water. What other ways do you use to cleanse or protect yourself before a reading, after a reading, when you're working with somebody, when you're recording your podcast? There's so many opportunities through Zoom, through anything, that we absorb other people's energies. And it's finding that way. I have so many crystals around my desk because I'm on calls with clients all the time and get them outside and use paleo and smudge. Like, what are your methods for clearing and cleansing?
So I love that question. And one of the things that I would say to anyone who's opening up, who's doing healing work, or who's already been doing it, the basic stuff is like the most important stuff.
Yes.
We try to complicate it, and we're like, I'm going to speak the light language of the multidimensional beings of the intergalactic council, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying it's not real. Yes, I've had contact with them. But what I'm saying is you're here on earth right now. Ground, be
Mhm.
present in your body, take care of your body, drink enough water, walk, have enough plants. I have so many plants. I'm like, this is not a real one behind it. But all the others are like, there's 49 plants in my house. I'm also now living in a place of nature. If you're not living in a place of nature, have live things, have your crystals. you need to develop your own medicine bag, your own tool bag, right? Of what works for you, because we're all different. So for me, for a billion years, like really since I'm a teenager, I take a bath. I don't know how I don't have like paper thin like skin at this point, because I would just go in a bathtub, go in and take a deep breath and just call in my higher self, my angels and guides. I call in my well ancestors and those doing the work on the other side. And I say, help me release what is mine and what is not mine, and anything that no longer serves my greatest health, my greatest abundance, my greatest um, embodiment and presence on this earth. And I take like 3 deep breaths, like in the water, and I release it, and I come out and I'm like, new, dancing around. And my partner doesn't believe in this stuff. I mean, he does, he knows when the energy's off, but he says, I don't believe in this stuff, but you go into your bath, you do whatever you do, and then you come out, you're like new, you're like got energy, you can dance, you're like full of like life. So I think grounding, which means, connecting your body, connecting to your own body, and then connecting
Mm-hmm.
to the earth, or connecting to the presence, the floor of where we're standing, is very important. I use smudge as well. I use breath. I use a bell. I don't, here it is right next to me, right? And so I clear the air. Remember that clapping also clears air. So if you feel anything weird in the room, it's like sound, bell, um, breath. Just be like, if you feel heavy, be like, and you're just like, and you just kind of bring your shoulders up and release it. Intention is everything. So the important thing
Mm-hmm.
is, like, sometimes people say to me, oh yeah, I like my sage, or I like my smudge, I do it. But I'm like, are you present when you're doing it? Because I know people sometimes light it and they're like this, waving their arm around, but they weren't
Mm-hmm.
there. So the key
Mm-hmm.
thing is to be in your intention. So my mom basically like ran the water, said, breathe, feel your feet like on the ground, feel yourself in your body, your breath is low. And now call in your higher self, call in your guides, your angels who guide you in this life. And I did. And then she's like, and now the intention is release. I let go of everything. So she like ran it.
Mm-hmm.
And with Latinos, and other folks that I met, we literally like go, ha, and throw our arms forward, like, go, we're like literally throwing it away, like we're like, bye, get away from me, and put it back into the earth. And we like ask that the earth kind of like take it back and transform it. And so, but you could do it with breath, where you're like, I release it. Sound is so important. Like, I think so many of us were taught to be quiet, even going right, releasing with a sound. And we're afraid of our own sounds, as women, we have to be ladylike and pretty and quiet, or
Right.
whatever it is. But no, go and just let it out. I went to a circle that was very well protected like 4 years ago, but I came back so heavy that I came back to my office and I called the directions, and so everybody's different
Mm-hmm.
practices. And I called in the directions, I called in my guides and angels, and I started to like grunt and release, like, it was like all these weird sounds. But when I went upstairs, my husband said, you did not look like yourself. You looked exhausted. You look beat. He goes, I thought you were going to be energetic after this circle that you attended. But then you went up, I heard weird sounds, I smelled smells, and then you came back and you were like full of light. And so now he knows. He's like, do what you do. And so give yourself the permission to explore different practices and use them consistently, because right now more than ever, especially in the pandemic, we're around more of the same people. If you're home with your family, you can't get away by leaving and to go to your job. And I'm not saying you should get away, but I mean saying, there's a lot of emotions and experiences that people aren't having because of the pandemic. There's a lot of loss and grief, and so it's really important for us to be on our grounding, on our cleansing. I also use a lot of Reiki. I use the symbols in the room. I also have a practice that I teach people in my program with, we discover our own symbol. Like, it's like the ancient medicine shield, almost like a shield, like the
Mm-hmm.
symbol as a shield. And I used to walk, I'm from New York City. I was in New York City till my 40s. I was on subway since I'm 13 years old, with men grabbing at you, people squeezing on, things happening to you. Um, Seeing everything, seeing raw humanity right in front of you in all its forms, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
like, there's no protection. There's no suburban kid here, right? Where you're protected from all the things. I
Mm-hmm.
was in it, and I developed this thing at 19, and I'd have this golden light around me, and I'd literally send the message of information as I'm traveling through subways going, hey, could you move to the left? I'm walking through. But you got to think real fast, because like you're walking as you're doing it. And then people
Right.
would move, right? And so, but these are practices that you're going to practice at peace in your own home or in nature, where you're actually working on your energy field, and also practicing sending it out in a very nice way. You're not shoving people or intruding on their energy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, and color, you want to wrap yourself up in a color, like this beautiful color, that lapis color, right? This deep, like royal blue, is like one of my favorites. Because growing up, the Virgin Mary had that cloak on, right? So in Catholicism,
Mm-hmm.
I would see her, so I would imagine. And so these things that mean something to you, or you grow a connection with them, are the ones that are really going to help. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
commit to it, right? You can't be like, I'm going to ring the bell, but I don't know. Like, yeah, you could feel like that, but then be like, screw it. I'm ringing this bell. It's clearing the hell out of this. Nothing is going to stay here that I no longer need and want, or is for my highest good. And then you ring it. It's that commitment. And that's that self-empowerment where you claim your space here on earth, and you say, in this space I am cleansed and I'm clear. And I would add too, be mindful of drugs, be mindful of alcohol. There are some practices that people initiate into, that they use rum and peyote and a couple of other things, and maybe ayahuasca and rapé and other things. But those are people who were initiated into that, and they have a capacity to probably hold it in their body while not letting negative or other things attach to them. And I've worked with people in hypnosis where people kept smoking way too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the friendly weed of the universe. And they kept coming back with attachments that weren't theirs. And so they were like, okay, maybe 3 times a month to reduce my anxiety instead of every day. So, but everybody's different. There could be people out there who are like, oh, I smoke every day and it helps me with my practice and I'm doing great. So it's trial and error as well.
I think the main thing to take away from what you said is the intention and consistency, and finding that what resonates for you. Smudging for me, the smell of it brings me so grounded that I love that smell. I love being a part of that. So that is one where I'm really, it brings me into my body. And so,
Yes.
how you were saying that sometimes you just smudge, and there have definitely been times that I'm smudging the house and halfway through, and oh, wait, I quit repeating my chant. Uh, so, I love that you say that. Find the consistency and find what the intention and resonation for you. I don't know, is resonation a word we want to use there?
Well, no, but we can use it. Yeah, the resonance, the resonation. And I just thought of something else too. So I have a couple of big skirts, like really wide, big skirts that you could like flip around as you're dancing. And that's something that's always been part of my, I guess, family life. I'll put it on and I'll put on some drum music and I dance into the
Mm,
directions and I clear my space through dancing and moving the skirts. But I also then feel good because of the endorphins, right? And I've strengthened my
mm.
own energy field and my own mental health. And so nothing is out of bounds. If you need to jump, jump. If you need to dance, dance. If you need to shout, shout. Like, we need to do what we need to do
I
to
love
keep us
that.
grounded and healthy.
Well, and that kind of leads me into what I wanted to kind of let be the final question. So I feel like it's a really good one because you talk about intention and consistency, and we did my Akashic Records, and so I'm super excited about that bonus episode. And something you mentioned earlier, when you were a young teenager, you said you watched everybody get these readings and cry and have these shifts, but then not change anything. And what do we do with it? How do we heal after the deep downloads? And I know in our recording of the Akashic Records, we pause for a moment because it gets a little deep. And one of the things that we talk about is that my husband and I have had some struggles, and you gave me some really strong, I can't use the word advice because it wasn't advice from you. It was from the Akashic Records of the shift that I'm making into this next phase of life, and that I don't have to do it alone. And I'll just say, that was so powerful for me because it was a week ago we recorded that, actually exactly a week from today. And the shift that it made in me over the last week and his and my relationship, when something he said triggered me, I was able to take that mirror and look at me. And instead of saying, oh, that's him, it was the trigger of, am I choosing to do this on my own, or am I choosing to live life as a partner? And so I think, to just kind of briefly touch on that for a second, of how do we heal after the deep downloads? For me, that healing comes from the awareness of remembering. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, we did the Akashic Records. I had a couple hours of work, and then I went over to my soul sisters and did Reiki with her, and was able to spend an hour talking with her about all the stuff that I was unpacking from our session. And I think that for me is how I heal, of unpack it, look at it, and then walk around with a mirror in front of me. so I can see myself instead of see others. And I would love for you just to share maybe some direction that you give people after readings of how to heal from those deep downloads.
Thank you so much. I love that you're bringing this up. And I do want to talk a little bit more after this question about the Akashic Records.
Okay, yes, for
So,
sure.
so, and also we're in another time now. Like when I was a little kid, there was not all this information that we have. We did not have Wi-Fi. We did not have, so now people are able to heal in different ways that we didn't before, right? Because we
Mhm.
get a reading and then there was nothing to support us. Here, every social media platform, all the podcasts like this one, it's there to support us. We're in a time of deep accelerated healing around the world. That's why people are doing it.
Mhm.
They're doing it so hard. Many years ago, no, it was like that person would get the reading and then they still had to go through their life. Nobody was going to talk to them about it because there weren't like Reiki masters on every block or on every Instagram account. Now we're all over the place, right? So, but I love that you did that. So one of the ways that we can do it, I think, is that having that consciousness that we don't need to do it alone. Like we did the session and then you went and got your Reiki and then you talked to someone. A lot of healers, including myself at some point, we think that it's like, okay, me and spirit alone, we got to do it alone. We are in a body and we are interconnected to other humans, and community so important that it is important for us to get the right healers to be able, because we only know what we know, right? We only are cut from the perspective of what we've known. And so it's really important for us to get the support that we need. There are some other ways that we could do this is to continue educating ourselves and to allow ourselves the space to look at ourselves from our higher self. And how do I mean that? I think that what happens in the Akashic Records, because it's a space of love and truth, that there's no blame on anyone. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Whereas a
mhm.
tarot card might be like,
Yes.
wake up, bitch. Sorry, I don't know. Can we curse here? I don't know. Wake up, I'm gonna slap you, right? Which is hilarious memes and hilarious TikTok videos. But and I used to read tarot for 20 years, or it could be very like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And so it's like harsh. But the energy of the Akashic Records is this loving space. And so if you've gotten a beautiful reading, if you've gotten a deep download for yourself, allow yourself to spend some time talking to also a trusted healer who's
Mhm.
at a different perspective and can hold, but it's not about them, right? There, because I feel
Mhm.
like your Reiki person was there for you. And also to journal, to sit down and allow to free flow some thoughts, right?
Mm.
And to allow yourself to write down the thoughts without judgment, without making it pretty writing or an essay or a post for Instagram. Just allow yourself
Right.
to write what's coming through and to sit with it. To not, I find that some people are having an spiritual experience and then sharing it immediately, like online. Like, wait a
Yes.
minute, let it like sit with you for a moment, because the healing is still unpacking, right?
Yes.
And after you get a reading, and let's say something, like I'll give you an example of things that I used to see or have seen. A lot of people will get a reading where they're like, oh, this person's cheating on you and they're a bad person and you better get it and you better get out of there, blah, blah. So then they come out and they could be victimized. You could come out of a reading like that feeling victimized.
Yeah. I see that.
Or you can say to yourself, is this a pattern for me?
Mhm.
What, and again, we're not blaming the victim, but this is what I ask myself. What inside me needs to transform in order for me to receive what I'm wanting to receive, right?
Mhm.
These are deep questions that are not going to be answered from the ego. They're deep, they're coming from your spirit, and you're going to have to allow yourself to spend time. And the other thing too is asking what of my childhood without blame, right? So I would sit down, breathe, ground, call in your higher self, ask your higher self, your angels and guides to give you this expanded view of yourself, right? This higher self view, this deepest knowing of part of yourself. What within me has attracted this lesson? Is there a part of me that feels that I don't deserve better? Is there a part of me that is living out a pattern from my ancestral like lineages? Does this happen to my mother, my grandmother? So instead of demonizing the person who, let's say, is cheating or doing something on the relationship, and I use that as an example, we start to ask ourselves, how can we heal through this? How can we
Mhm.
heal so this doesn't repeat? Are we going to confront them or talk to them or share with them? Do we need therapy? Do we need EMDR, right? Do we need EFT? Because just like cleansing, clearing, and grounding need consistency, our healing work needs consistency too,
Yes.
right? And so it's not like, oh, one big breakthrough and we're done. I've been on this path how many years? Decades, and I'm still healing. I just got back from Utah, right? And had a lot of healing in nature and like downloads and breakthroughs and releasings. And so as long as we're in existence, we are in process of healing if we allow
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, right? So ask yourself those deep questions where they're not ego, like they did this to me, they're harming me, instead of blame, blame, blame. Although those are your feelings, and I don't want you to bypass them, like feel your feels. At some point, go into the inner knowing. You're like, hey, did this happen before? Yeah. Okay. What about my behavior? Am I jumping into a relationship too fast? Do I need therapy? Is this something that happened with my parents? And so when you start unpacking the patterns, right? That's where I think people around me at that time didn't have the support to unpack the patterns
Mm-hmm.
and heal childhood dysfunctional, family systems. And so I think some of these are really important questions. And I say when you grab onto a thread, like hold on to it. If you grab that thread and you pull it, right, on a dress or in a scarf, it starts to unravel.
Yes.
You got to hold on to that healing thread and you got to pull it. Even though you're afraid it might dismantle your life or you think you are, you're like, keep pulling it. And you just keep pulling it and pulling it. And that'll guide you. Like I went into therapy in my 30s. I wound up doing sweat lodge every year for 18 years, like, and releasing there. I wound up working with ancestral healers. I wound up working with Reiki, I wound up getting support for myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important. And, that's the whole point of this healing modality series that I've been airing is explore all those options out there and feel what resonates with you. Sit with it, explore it so that that resonates with me, that doesn't resonate with me. But sit with that in your soul for a little while to see, do you want to explore it more? Or is that just not yours and there's something else out there for you?
Absolutely. And I forgot this very important part. I love what you said. That's really key. So everybody listen to that. Is move towards practices that serve you. Like I didn't teach
Mhm.
Reiki online. In fact, I focused on Akashic Records, on intuitive development, on hypnosis, on courses. But when pandemic hit, Spirit's like, you need to do this and you need to do this, pay what you can, because people are stressed out,
Mhm.
anxiety in the collective and in their personal lives. And so learning a practice that you could do for yourself, because of course a healer is not always going to be available for you. We can't run off and always do what we do. And I can say I do self Reiki on me every day. And I
Mhm.
learned
Absolutely.
it like decades ago and I'm still doing it. But for you, it may be working with your crystals, it may be chanting, it may be yoga, adopting, yeah, adopting a practice that allows you to feel safe and held and gives you a system or a process through which you can work through your healing is really important.
Mhm.
And that's why I love the
Yeah.
Akashic Records too. And so I was a tarot reader for 20 years. And then a friend of mine who was in California who did Akashic Records, she's like, you should do the training. You should do the training. So I did the training in 2014 or 2015, one of those. And I, even though I'd been reading now 20 years professionally, I was like, I'm always learning, always
Mhm.
ready, right? Always ready. It's like you're always evolving. And what was so great about it is that it was created by Jennifer Longmore, Soul Journeys method. There's many methods to read the records. Um, and so she has a therapy background. So she created it talking about things that most readers don't talk about, transference, right? When we transfer,
Mhm.
projection, all these elements that a lot of readers don't even know about, don't have that level of education. And so it was really wonderful is that in the first training, I got to work on myself. And a lot of
Mm.
healers and a lot of readers and a lot of diviners or seers, they tend to support and serve everyone all the time in different ways. This is a creative space for you to be able to heal. And we talk a little bit about that, in our session when we did it, that the Akashic
Yes.
record is truth and love, right? It's the living record that holds the truth of our soul and its creation story through all dimensions and planes and times. And it shares, and it's a Sanskrit word for the energetic substance from which all life is formed. So it's this energy, this extension of God. And if you look at any major religions, you know that there's always the book, right? The book of this, there's the Bible,
Mhm.
the Torah, and the same in the Akashic record is this energetic book of knowledge, right? It's this book of wisdom. And what I love about the records and the record keepers are these souls, the souls that hold space for you and are your guides through lifetimes. So we do get
Mhm.
guides that just show up in this particular life when you're carrying
Yes.
out a particular mission. And then there are guides that are with you throughout. And in this beautiful energetic frequency of love and truth, where we're not castigated, we're not punished, we're not yelled at, we're like loved, because the truth is we have eternity. The truth is we have eternity, right? Of course, in this life is Cris, in this life is Vanessa. We want to do some things to be able to experience some things. So we're like, we're going to do it now. And in the Akashic record, you can heal and you can release and you can break vows and contracts that have kept you stuck. And so
Mhm.
once I learned that, I stopped using the tarot deck, although it's beautiful, and I love it, and I did it for so long. And the Akashic records have been like my thing. And I'll say, and I want to share a story that dealt with me. So I had a thing where I felt like I had to do everything alone
Mhm.
with spirit, right? With spirit, but
Right.
meaning me physically alone. And I hired somebody years ago to be, and I've had a part-time assistant 11 years, but I hired somebody to take up more responsibility. And of course, she ran away with her person, her lover, um, when I'm on vacation with my family, and I promised them that I would not be working constantly. So I did have to do some
Mm.
things like teach some classes live, but she was going to handle certain things. She's gone. I'm there. I'm Miami. Like we rented a bungalow where like the family's there, and I'm there trying to like, oh my God, she didn't send out this. Oh my God. And I have to do it. And in that process, I start repeating, of course, I have to do everything myself. Of course, I have to do everything myself. Right?
Mhm.
That pattern, that story, my back started killing me. So I did what I did. I spent some time on the beach, had to manage people's upset with me. When I came back to New York, I got up one morning, I could barely walk. I had to literally crawl on the floor. And I crawled on the floor, laid on the wooden floor and laid back. And I went in my records. I went in my records. And I was like, where is the core of this? And I saw so many lifetimes, enslavement, or having to work really hard because life was just very hard, in the particular circumstances of the environment. And life was very rough back in the day. We idealized it so much,
Yes.
but we were making our own clothes and cutting up the animals to cook them and hunting them, unless, I don't know,
Mhm.
we were wealthy and somebody was doing it for us. But the majority of us were doing all that. And I covered all these lives, and I just started breaking the contract, releasing, releasing, releasing. Now I couldn't move, right? I literally had to crawl into the floor from my bed and lay there and do this healing, cry, sob, work through it. And I was able to sit up after. It was a mild pain that remained, but then I put ice on it. And I never had that reaction ever again. I
Mhm.
never have ever gotten up like that. And the back can be like holding the world together.
Yes.
Financial stress on the lower back, right? Emotional stress. And so that's just a quick thing where I learned how to do the Akashic Records, went in and did that healing for myself.
Mhm. Well, I will tell you how healing just in a week's time the reading that you did for me was. And so I'm so grateful, grateful, grateful because I've never had that. I've always heard of them. I've always been a little hesitant, like, it sounds a little too deep for me. I'm not sure what I want to hear. And knowing that my husband and I were having some struggles, that's why I intentionally had that time set up with my soul sister to go do Reiki with her because I didn't know what I was going to need. uh,
Right.
and and that is something you said, that it's the love, and it was so loving, and there was so much insight and so much support in it that I invite people not to be nervous about it. And that's one of the reasons we're doing these bonus episodes, is so that people can hear a session and get a feel for what happens to break that stereotype, break that fear, break that concern of the memes that you see of like, girl, get out of here.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful for that. And I invite people, this episode's going to air on Tuesday. Those will release on Thursday. I'm super excited about releasing it because it was so powerful. And I know people are going to want to learn more, and they're going to want to find you and connect with you. So what's the best way, Vanessa, for people to find you and follow you and connect and learn more from you?
Thank you, Cris. The BizBruja, BRUJA.com. Online, that's my website. And then the BizBruja on Instagram. And there is a class coming up, by the way, for the Akashic Records to read your own. I think it'll be, yeah, it's December 4th and December 11th. So it's just like right there, right before it. But I'm always teaching them and then teaching people how to read them for their clients,
Mhm.
and how to support healing and manifestation in the records. But I'm very inspired too to do I wasn't going to do a sale, by the way, but then we did this. So I'll share the information with you for a mini Akashic reading. I wasn't going to do a sale, but I was like, you know what? I'll share the details. It just came to me as we're here. So I'll send it with you if you want to share it, or it'll be on my website for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll list it all in the show
I'd
notes
like it to
on
be just for your people.
groundingjourney.com.
I'd like it
Yeah.
to actually to be have more clarity. I'll offer it to just the people who listen to the podcast. So there you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it'll be on groundingjourney.com, groundingjourneypodcast.com. Under the blog post, we'll make sure we have all the links to your social media, the links to your podcast, the links to your website, and the offer that you're giving. So thank you so much, because it is so gracious. And I firsthand can say this was so powerful for me. And there's been such a shift in my life in the last week that it's definitely something I encourage people to explore talking with you more.
Thank you, Cris. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. I'm so happy when I hear that. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your guest appearance, and thank you for the healing that you started for me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm honored.
Thanks for being part of my journey. I would love to be part of yours. If you're interested in being a guest on Grounding Journey, I'd love to hear from you. Please visit my website at groundingjourney.com and you'll see the link to apply.